Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today for our Stories, Our Voices, FPCC's Fall 2025 online learning series. And as Cindy noted, please feel welcome to share where you're calling in from in the chat and say a hello. FPCC supports language, culture, heritage, and arts revitalization for BC First Nations. One of our offices is located in the village of Woodrotlip, also known as Sartlip, near Brentwood Bay. And we also have an office in Tecumlips to Secwepemc. This year, the FPCC Arts program is hosting the online learning series, which is open to anyone involved in revitalization work to learn and be inspired by our webinar presenters. The session is going to be about an hour and a half, with the last 30 minutes being open for questions and answers. So if you do have any questions that come up during the presentation, please do put them in the Q&A function, which you can find at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be happy to answer them at the end of the presentation. You're also welcome to share reactions. I saw a few people already sharing some reactions throughout the presentation. But I'll introduce myself. My name is Leah Anthony, and I am an arts program coordinator with First Peoples Cultural Council on the arts team. And I'm, really excited to be here with you all today. I'm of the Nacosli Wooten Band on my mom's side, as well as Portuguese, and on my dad's side, English, Irish, and French Canadian. And today I'm calling in from beautiful and the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I'll pass it over to my co-presenter.
Thanks, Leah. Hello, everyone. My name is Cindy Charlie Boy. I'm Chilcotin and Secwepemc. And today I'm calling in from Kamloops in Secwepemc Ulu, and also known as Kamloops. And I work with the arts team as well. I mainly work with individual artist program and with Leah. And I'm happy to be here today.
All right, we're going to share our slides here and get started with the presentation. So you joined the session, so you know the title of our presentation is Project Planning, Giving Your Vision the Structure It Needs. So this is an overview of what we will be discussing today. While we work directly with the arts program, we'll be talking about project planning from a broader view in a way that will be helpful, hopefully, to everyone. And within that, we will be talking about visioning, and then discussing what project planning is, looking at structure and work planning, and then talking about gathering resources and building deeper connections and relationships, and how you can use your project plan to pivot where necessary and work towards any future projects.
Okay, so visioning is where a part of our project planning process where we see or know what we want to create. It could be a vision in our mind's eye, it could come from our dreams, it could be a natural part of community planning, like a natural progression of that. And so, one thing that we want to consider when we're visioning and we're about to do project planning is our vision short term or is it long term? And that really helps us decide, are we doing a project or is this part of possibly potentially a longer series of projects? And knowing our vision and really connecting with that really well helps us understand better what it is that we want to create. And it helps other people understand the potential project and even the work that we do. Um, Let me see here. One of the things that I wanted to share was that holding our ideas as a vision can really give us the motivation and the tenacity that we need that we'll be able to access throughout the project. And as we write about it, as we do our planning, it'll bring in energy and emotion. It'll help us choose the words that we want to describe our project, and it'll come across in our voice, and it helps create what we call at FPCC the spirit of the project.
Thanks, Cindy. So what is a project plan? Planning can come into any part of your life. It might look like exactly what Cindy is saying, visioning, journaling, writing in reminders on your phone, agreeing on meeting times, budgeting for daily expenses. But project plans are more specific. A project plan is really taking that creative visioning and determining how you're going to be working towards and accomplishing that vision. So it is a document typically that maps out the details of the project, including the goals, objectives, tasks, who is going to be involved, the timeline of when the activities will take place, and the budget and how much you'll be paying people, how much everything is going to cost. The project plan also serves as a tool for evaluating the feasibility and progress of a project, as well as managing and navigating change. Cindy and I are really coming from this presentation from a creative project planning perspective, although, as I said at the start, we really do hope that these project planning tools and tips that we talk about today will apply to any form of planning. So a bit more on project planning. Why is this important to us as creatives? It's really because the project plan, it provides a framework for completing a successful project. And developing a plan for your arts project can guide the process while also providing a source document when completing a narrative or written portions of a grant application, a residency application, um, community exhibition proposals, or going to a community event and presenting, or when explaining to your ideas to potential collaborators. Project plan can also help with creating some of those achievable, tangible goals and avoiding problems, managing any unexpected challenges that might come up or surface, and ensuring that the project really is staying on track, um, even if things do have to pivot. But within your project timeline, you can start referencing your plan to see how things have been staying on that track, or if you have to make adjustments, and you can always go back and change things according to that. A project plan really brings together all the elements of your project and acts as the guide to help you accomplish your goals. And the planning will demonstrate how you will achieve that vision.
Okay, so when we talk about structure, I want us to remember that a project plan is actually a document. And so it has basically four main parts: the project description, the project team, a work plan, and a budget. And there are other parts. For example, you might need to include a bit of background about why this project is important, a little bit of context, whether that's history and community, or um, information about yourself, information about people on the project team, your bios. You might want to include samples for your project. Um, One other thing is that there might be other things that you have to bring into your project plan, such as a letter of support. But when we talk about these four main things, they really give structure to your project. And the way that we can create this structure is to answer really basic questions. Who, what, where, when, and why, and how. All of these questions should be answered throughout your project plan. Someone should be able to look and start to get some of the answers. And if they don't fully see something in the budget, they can go back to the project team or back to the work plan. So, having those questions, one thing I will share is that I learned recently that starting with your why is one of the most important things. Really, it goes back to that vision. Why are we doing this and why now? Why is it important? That helps us right away with the project description and understanding who the ideal project team would be. Even if you can't get those people that you know that you would love to bring certain people on in order to accomplish your project. So the other thing about this structure is that it not only answers those questions, but it helps people see and understand your vision. It helps them understand why it's important. It helps them understand whether you've thought everything through and that you understand what it takes or what it will take to accomplish this project. When they look at the details or kind of like a map that you've created with the structure, they'll understand your project a bit better and they'll understand you and your work a bit better too. We can't expect someone who only works with budgeting, for example, to understand all of the other details, but when they read the project plan, it should start to really click and make sense for them. And as you're doing this, you can use any tools that you want to be organized. You could have your calendars, your flip chart paper, your post-it notes, spreadsheets, photos, anything that helps you to see your plan. But within your plan, you're only going to include what's actually necessary for someone to look at the plan and understand it and be able to see whether this plan can kind of go forward as is. So if the grant, or sorry, if the project plan is for a grant, just for example, then you're going to want to look at the, um, I'm losing my words here because I got ahead of myself, but you're going to want to look at the details that are needed for that grant. And you're going to want to include those details, but not necessarily extra details. If it's for your workplace, you're making a project plan for your workplace, see if they have a template and follow that template. You can also look online and find different templates for project plans. So you can create your own, say if you're not writing a grant or you're not creating a plan for an employer or you just don't have a template. But what you want to do is if there is a template or if there are guidelines, that's the word I was looking for was guidelines. If there are guidelines, then make sure that you follow the guidelines really closely and that you're not going overboard with the amount of information that you provide or the amount of words. If there's a word count limit, make sure you stick to that. It's usually because the people who are reading the plan need to understand in a concise way. And so, in that moment, when you really want to like talk about and describe your plan, you might need to bring it in a little and see like, how do I choose words that really connect with my vision, but still will meet the needs of other people?
Totally.
Yeah, I think I got everything there, Leah.
Definitely. Um, Going off of the structure, the work plan is one of those like foundational pieces of the structure because this is your proposed strategy or the schedule for your project. And it is an estimate of when the project activities are going to be taking place, who is going to be involved at each of those stages, how long is each stage going to take. This is really where you're thinking about the key benchmarks that you've determined for yourself, of what the project is, what month, what year, what day are these taking place, or are you hoping to reach that taking place? And then you're able to build out the smaller timelines around those larger benchmarks. So determining what the big benchmarks are and then thinking about what it's going to take to achieve each of those. In your work plan, some things you may want to include are when the research for your project is going to be taking place. Are there still things that you need to figure out? Are there places or people that you want to visit? Is there a course that you want to take to feel prepared? Another thing to consider is if any capacity building needs to be taking place before you get started. So reaching out to people, when is that going to be happening? To start building that project team, um, and figuring out the areas of the project that you might need to pull in some extra supports. Another thing to consider is when realistically you're going to be working on this project and trying to find a balance with working on the project and your other life tasks and things that you have going on, and just getting really realistic about that. You'll also want to consider the different stages of the project and what do you need to put into motion before moving on to the next step. Who is going to be involved at each step, and what does it look like for the project phase or your entire project and your vision to like really come to life? When is that going to be completed? What does that look like for you? Is there a day that you're working towards? Is there a timeline that you're working towards? So when we begin the project planning and putting our vision on the paper, sometimes it really does seem like big and overwhelming, and the work plan can really support with that. You might be thinking, this is going to take me so long, this is going to take years. But when you have that work plan written out, it really helps you in your mind, like get those order of operations of what needs to happen when, on the paper and written out. So maybe it will feel less overwhelming at that time. And I think Cindy was mentioning this earlier. Sometimes you need to break up your project into phases, and you do realize that the vision is a really long-term vision, and there are some smaller phases that come up before you can accomplish that very long-term vision. Can also be really hard to sometimes to self-motivate to work towards your project. But the work plan is like that place where you can put your self-determined deadlines into place that so maybe you can self-motivate towards each of those little deadlines instead of it being such a big end goal at the end. And that really helps put the project into action. It's also good to keep in mind that even though now you have your work plan written out, it is a guide. It's a guide for you at the end of the day. And it's totally okay if things need to shift or change as the project develops. And sometimes certain tasks are going to take longer than we think. Sometimes things will even go quicker when things start moving, the ball gets rolling. So work plans are really a way to keep yourself on track, but you can also edit things as the project moves along.
Okay, gathering resources. This is another practical part of planning. Um, it's almost like I'm thinking of it as like an inventory where you start to list and gather together everything that you have and everything that you might need. But it's a little bit more complex than that. And then you might realize, and as you're doing these exercises, you start to realize, like, oh, yeah, we also have this resource. we actually have this resource. We have another resource that we can use to help us with our project. And this will really help you develop and round out the project descriptions, the work plan, and the budget. So I was thinking for myself in my personal life, I have an example where I'm often asked to teach singing in community. And so sometimes it will feel to me like, oh, this is really easy. We can sing these three songs, we'll go in, we'll have fun. It's so easy to plan. But recently I was asked to plan for teaching over a period of 15 weeks. And it's not only me involved in the project, there could be elders that are involved. There's a language coordinator. There's an entire community of people that want to learn, including children, elders, young adults. And so then we have to start doing more planning than before. And for me, it's so easy for me to think, well, I can just be creative. But it's not just me involved in the project. There's other people, and I have to think ahead of how do they plan, for week 7? How do they get the resources ready for that? And I also have to think of how will we keep people coming back to the class? How will we engage people? And so it's not only about the activities that we'll do, we need to plan them out really well and in advance, but we also have to think about, is it going to be online? Is there going to be connectivity? Do we have a Zoom account? Do we have some good sound if we want to do drumming? What are some of the teachings that we want to share that go along with the songs? And do we already have a curriculum that's been written in the past? So we start to plan and we're gathering all of these things together, the things that have already been created. And of course, there's maybe some things that we won't write out onto the paper. It could be that as we go along, we realize, like, oh my gosh, we really need to have a smudge once in a while. And so let's plan for that. Or if we're going to be meeting together, let's have a meal. And so there's all of these resources that we're gathering together. Well, someone needs to have a budget. It might not be me as the teacher, but if I'm aware of the budget, then I'm not going overboard with what I'm trying to plan. And, or I'm not thinking that this actually goes for 20 weeks when it goes for 15. So it's the really practical, tangible things that we need to gather together. And when we do gather them together and we have them all there and we have a plan in place, it actually supports our creativity. We still get to be creative, even though the plan is set. We still have the opportunity and we can feel supported within that structure by having gathered those resources together. Okay, so I'm just going to ask everyone just for a moment to try not to read the screen too much because it can be so easy to lean in and try to see all these details here. Um, we are going to talk a little bit about these details. This is just an example budget. It's not a recommendation of a budget. Um, there could be many things that someone looking at this would say, like, what? Wait, that's wrong. The point of having the budget, again, is to bring structure, and this helps add detail to your project. Okay, so knowing how much the budget is overall is really helpful. And so some people that are watching might think, well, I don't have a budget. I don't need a budget to do my project. It's me. I've got all my materials. Well, this is where by practicing and visioning, you could start to think about what could I do if I did have a budget? If I was able to be financially supported, could I put more time and energy into my project? If I was able to include some elder involvement or some other artists, how would I support them? What would that take? And so this is why we're looking at a budget. Um, there's some details that I do want to point out in this budget, and those, oh, I'm just one second.
Cindy has her pup with her dog, so she might just need to pop out for a second.
The landline started ringing.
Oh,
Not expecting that. Okay, okay. So when we look at the budget, this is a part of your work plan that is so needed if you're delivering a program in community or you're applying for a grant. And so for some people, it might be really easy to create budgets. And for some, it might feel like it's a different language. And what I want to share is that if you think of it as a language, then think of it as a language that you could reclaim and that you could learn. And this helps your project a great deal. So we don't want to shy away from making budgets. Um, there's a couple details that I want to point out. This part is like a little bit harder to describe, and so that's why we want to put words to it so that someone else, if you weren't there in the room, they could look at it and they could start to get an idea. What is it that you're trying to create? And so when I look at the a middle column there where it says funding sources, I could see that this person has a grant. They have some money in their budget. They also have, if you look down on the screen, they have some in-kind contributions. So they're able to use the youth center. It looks like they're able to use it. If you look at the math, it's like they're able to use this youth center 5 times and they don't have to pay that cost. And then they also, it looks like they need some equipment, but the grant is not confirmed yet. So it helps you to get an idea and give an idea of what's actually needed. And someone looking at this might start to have questions, like they might think like, who is this artist? And they will be able to go look at a different part of your project plan, and they should be able to find out quite easily who the artist is, how much experience that they have, why is this the artist that's working on the project, and so on. They're going to be able to go and look at a different part of your project plan. Another question that might come up when we look at this budget is, oh no, um, honoraria is only $125. That's not enough for our elders. We need to honor them more. And so it's written right in the details here, just as an example, that this is $125 per day, and it has in brackets community maximum. So really, it's okay for us to find out within our community, is it a higher maximum? Is it and Or do we want to go above average when we're doing our project? Is this not a community project? Maybe it's an urban project and there are no maximums that we have to follow, but we have to stay within our budget. And so this really helps us make decisions, right? The math that we use here, we'll be able to move things around, make decisions, do planning, and it really involves getting out your calculator and doing the things and showing what you did. Okay, so yeah, if you could think about budgeting and planning as though they are resources that help you, and if you had to or wanted to, you could also get someone to help you with your budget if it's a hard part of your project planning. And same with all of the other parts. You will be able to reach out and get help from different places. Okay, so building deeper connections. So far, when we've talked about project planning, it might seem like it's linear. Like you have this vision, then you write the project description, your project team, your work plan. It might all seem linear, but it's really not. It's happening all at once. And as you're working on a project, you might have a vision in mind for a future project. You might even be thinking back to other projects that you've worked on, and it really should help you realize the deeper connections that are possible and that you want to create, especially when we're talking about language, culture, heritage, and arts revitalization. We really want to be aware that building deeper connections is so needed. So even if you're working on your own, you could, for example, you could journal about the things that are coming up for you, whether that's challenges or excitement about your project, unique ways that you're realizing. Like what happens for me sometimes is I'll remember something that my grandma had said to me, like 15 years ago, and I'll realize, like, oh, I understand that so much better now. And your the projects that we're working on should be able to help us realize, like, wow, we have this deep network with each other, with our culture, even if it somehow feels out of reach for people. We really want to think about if there were elders that we could involve, how would we honor them and how would we recognize them? If there are people that we hope to learn from, mentors, how are we going to connect with them, even if we're not doing it in this certain project? And a lot of times there are protocols that we either need to follow or need to become aware of. And one of the things that I'll share about protocols is that I was taught that they're there not as rules, not to limit us or prevent us from doing our work, but protocols are there in place to protect us and to help us do the work in a good way. And so if we don't know about protocols for, let's say, like a berry picking song, if we don't know the protocols for that, then we could start to feel into it and we could start to remember, like, oh yeah, what do they say about berry picking? Or, you know, what when do we When do we talk about these things? When do we not? So there's so many things that we could learn about protocols. I don't want that to be um, something that is only considered like law. It's something that we could explore and be creative with and really find a way to connect with that. So, having a relationship with the land as well is a really good example of honoring a protocol. And as you're working on your project plan, say that we go back to the point where it's your vision, right? And you're writing your project plan. As you think about these things, it should really help you answer some of the questions as you think about these deeper connections and thinking about, who would you want to collaborate with? It might not be possible yet, but holding that as a part of your vision is really important because it'll start to kind of plant that seed in your work. And it might come across in your writing, even if you're not there yet. It might come across as like, oh, this person has really thought it through. And even though this is a solo project, what they're doing is really meaningful, just for example.
Okay, we're back with connecting the dots. So really just reflecting on everything we just talked about and thinking about how those elements of the project plan can start coming together and really forming the big picture of your project and in the larger project plan. Cindy shared about starting to talk about your project with others and how that can really help bring the pieces of your project together. Bec and that's exactly what you're saying with the co-working call. It's like what might make sense to you might still need some more work to be clear to others, and get that clarity together. So when you start bringing all of the elements together, the more you talk about it, the more you can work out in a clear way and explain your project concept and the steps that it's going to take to achieve it. Once you have those major components of your project plan worked out, like your work plan and your budget and your project team, you can really start integrating the smaller details that connect those pieces, because those details are going to help you figure out the flow of the project in your own mind, which will support communicating your project plan in the application or in proposals later on, or just to others when you're explaining it. Because all of those major components that are on the screen should all tell the same story, so that anyone reading your project plan would have the ability to have their questions answered by all of those pieces separately and combined together. So the really big, larger project plan is often a tool for ourselves to hold ourselves accountable and see where we're going with our project. But you can take that larger plan and start making it concise, as Cindy described earlier, so that you can use it in different ways. For example, if you're applying to a residency that has a 300 word limit, it's super short word limit, you can take that detailed project plan and condense it and really pull out the like key pieces that communicate to your audience what you're doing, why you want to be doing it, and then the how of how you're doing it. As I shared regarding the work planning, the big project ideas may take multiple years, so breaking them up can really help. So if you're finding your project is a large concept that could take multiple years, it may be one vision, but require multiple smaller project plans that connect all of these dots together. Also, having this detailed, larger plan can really support um, you to be sharing about your project in your own voice, which is a really key part about grant writing or applying for applications or proposing or talking to others in community to be speaking about your project in your own voice so they can see your passion and the reasons why you want to be doing this and the trust that yes, you can do it. And that comes with the work planning as well. And this will include all the key details relating each of those components of your project together. And once you have that project plan, um, it's kind of a tool to be reviewing it and sharing back. So project planning is really an evolving process. You may have had to pivot throughout your project with team changes or unexpected challenges that came up. But if you had your project plan written well and detailed, you'll be able to keep track of those changes that took place and be flexible about where you have ended up and think about, okay, where can I go from here? And as you go through your project, your plan can also be a tool to help you assess or monitor how things are going and then reflect or evaluate what that means in terms of the project goals that you have set out for yourself. And then, if opportunities do arise, since you have kept track of what has taken place and where things may have needed to change, you'll be in a better position to adapt to opportunities. So, for example, if you were offered a chance to present your work in community and you're only so far along in the project, you can say, okay, well, I still have these few steps to accomplish, and then I'll be able to do that presentation. Once you've completed your project, the plan will also help you really look back and reflect and share about what you have accomplished or reflect on what things had to change and how you overcame different challenges throughout. This will help with planning for your next project. Um, because you'll want to ask yourself questions like what was working, what didn't work, can I build off this past plan? Can I use this as a template, as a resource that I've gathered when you start writing your next project plan? Because each time that you do this work of planning and work planning and budgeting, it really helps you build your own skill sets for planning in your life.
So yeah, kind of recapping everything that we want you to remember. So when we go back to your beginning of creating the structure, we really want you to remember that starting with your why will help you a lot. And that could be your own personal vision, your reason for doing this type of work. It could be also your community's reason. It doesn't have to be your own personal reason, but really starting with why are we doing this and what that helps us see like what the outcome that we want to have. Um, Leah talked about breaking your budget or breaking your project down. That's really important. Sometimes people have an idea that, they could get so much done in 4 or 6 months, but in reality, that particular project might actually take a couple years to create and to get through. And so, as you're planning to think about all of the, as many of the contingencies as you can, so that you realize, like, oh, this is a part of the bigger picture. I don't have to get everything done right now. So, say, for example, language revitalization, it's an always an ongoing activity. And so we don't have to get everything done really fast. It may be more meaningful if it takes place over time. Using your structure to tell the same story throughout your plan. This is really, really helpful. Your budget should definitely match with the activities that you say that you're going to do. And that should match with your timeline. Your timeline should match with, just for example, the seasons. If you say that you're going to, um, maybe travel out and gather 20 times within the month, but it's the coldest month of the year, maybe your story needs to shift a little bit, right? So you want to tell the same story throughout your entire project plan. And it's not that you're necessarily retelling, but it's that you're giving the details and they all match with each other. Another thing that we brought in was to focus on building deeper connections. So, again, going back to my example of not everything needs to happen at once. It sometimes it takes time for people to get to know you and to really trust or participate. There are times when I'm working with a group and we're singing, there are times when someone doesn't want to sing or they don't feel up to it that day. It doesn't mean that they're not learning, and it doesn't mean that they're not thinking about it later. And maybe when they go to sleep at night, they could hear the song, and another time they come in and they're leading the group. They've got the biggest, loudest voice, and they have so much energy that is bringing the whole group up. So when we do our writing, our project planning, and also when we're carrying out our projects, those deeper connections are happening. And then the last sort of takeaway that I think we have more than five, but we wanted to give you five. So the last one here is to be able to review, revise, evaluate, and report. And so one thing I was thinking about as an example was let's say you've created your project plan and you are going along with it and everything is going so smoothly. And all of a sudden, you are asked to um, add five more events, let's say, or someone offers you funding. They might ask to work with you, collaborate on something. You'll know where you're at in your plan, and you'll be able to see if that works or if you need to wait. You'll be able to see. So that's what I mean when I say like review and revise. You'll be able to see where you're at. Does this fit in my plan, or is this a whole other project, a whole other intention? And no, I'm going to stick with my original plan. And that's a part of evaluating as well. The other thing is that for those people that work in community and maybe work with like really great big numbers of people or long-term projects, they might want to see how are these programs going? How are these, how is this actually working for us? And it might be going really well, and there's lots of data showing that. And so then they can make future decisions based on this evaluation. And reporting, it doesn't have to mean um, technical reporting. Reporting could be like what you share out to community. Maybe you have a newsletter or you have social media, or maybe you're just talking to your family and you can say, you know what, this project is going so amazing and we've seen this, and this results so far. our project's not even done and we already met our goals and we still have 12 weeks left. And so that's a part of reporting. And because I said the report word, I am going to say that having your project plan really well written, it helps you so much if you do have to do technical reporting, because you could go back to your project plan, see what you wrote. You could even copy paste some of that into your report. If you had to write a report for chief and council, you could again go back to your project plan, remind yourself what was your vision, and take some of those words and descriptions and put it right into that report. And so it's not a project plan. What I was realizing is it's not necessarily a standalone document. It's not a, even if it is a one-time project, it doesn't have to be a one-off. It can keep giving back to you. You know, if you're writing content or maybe you decide to become a student, all of these skills that you used in project planning are going to help you not only to be organized, but to be able to write clearly and communicate in different ways. Communicate with structure.
Totally. Totally agree. That really does bring us to the close, the end of the presentation. We just have a few links up here, how you can learn more about FPCC. Um, and we're going to move into the question and answer. But if you want to scan that QR code, it will bring you to the wicked awesome FPCC Spotify playlist. So you can listen to some great music